good evening, good afternoon, good day from wherever you're joining, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for being here for Inspire, Empower, Lead, a virtual conversation series where we bring in experts to motivate, to inspire, to uplift us, women who are doing big, incredible things that can hopefully motivate the next generation of young people. My name is Brittany Rudish, and I am the speechwriter here at the U.S. Embassy in Warsaw. So I write some of the messaging for Ambassador Brzezinski, and I also have the incredible honor to work with some great people here in the public affairs section. So I am here as your host today, and I will be running this virtual show. We also have Dr. Kathryn Huff, the Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy at the Department of Energy. A very long title, a very important title, but we will be going by Katie. She said that's fine. So that just shows you the type of person she is. Katie is really down to earth. She keeps it real, and we're really lucky to have her with us today. Start from the very beginning, and we're going to just go back to your background, because I always think it's interesting how someone gets to where they are. I mean, look at your office. You're at the Department of Energy. This girl who grew up in Texas somehow made it all the way to this office space. So how does one do that? How did you get to where you're at today?
Oh, well, I grew up in Texas, a rural part of Texas, the child of engineers. I was a tinkerer, a curious person. In the United States, not all high schools are alike, and I ran out of math to take in my somewhat rural high school and had the opportunity to go to a public magnet boarding school that allowed me to take college classes at the same time as I was graduating high school instead of high school. And this Texas Academy of Math and Science really helped me identify an interest in physics. I spent the summers working at Los Alamos National Laboratory because of that opportunity, and discovered a real, interest in physics, interest in the development of nuclear energy. I went to the University of Chicago for my undergraduate degree in physics. I minored in philosophy because I'm sort of curious about everything. But I proceeded from that to nuclear engineering PhD at the University of Wisconsin, where I did research in computational nuclear engineering, fuel cycle analysis. I spent some time working at various national labs during that time as well, including Idaho National Laboratory and Argonne National Laboratory. I proceeded to a postdoc position at the University of California, Berkeley, where I worked not just with the nuclear engineering department, working on reactor design, but also the National Nuclear Security and Science and Security Consortium, which is a nuclear non-proliferation security administration consortium at the university. I also had a fellowship with the Berkeley Institute for Data Science. Because of my computational interests, I became a little more interdisciplinary, learned a little data science. I wrote a book about using Python for scientists. It's called Effective Computation in Physics, while I was a postdoc there, and it was really fun. And then I became a professor. After my postdoc, I went to the University of Illinois to become a professor of nuclear engineering. I was about 5 years into that job when I got an email from the Department of Energy saying, hey, we'd like to talk to you about leadership in the Department of Energy. When there's a new administration in the United States, political positions are chosen at the sort of top level of the agencies. But most of the agencies are made up of career government officials. And I thought, finally, I'm important enough. They're going to ask me, who I think should be the political appointee in charge of the Office of Nuclear Energy. And so I spent the evening thinking, who am I going to tell them who should run this office? And I had a whole list of 10 people ready. And when I had the phone call the next day, it turned out that they actually wanted me to come to DC and run this office. And it was a great honor. And I've been doing that now for 2.5 years on behalf of the Biden administration. It's an inherently temporary position. And when I am done with it, I will return to the University of Illinois and my professorship, where I'm on unpaid leave of absence. So that's about it.
I don't know if that's about it. That's a lot. You have lived about 5 people's lives in your short life. Because I also will say this as well, everyone, the caveat, she's in her 30s. So you have, conquered the world in such a short amount of time. But I think for you, the most interesting part to another component of this is that you knew this would be possible at a very young age, because inspiring, empowering, you saw it from your mother that's possible, that this is normal, that being a woman in STEM is just a normal part of life.
That's right. It's the most natural thing in the world. The first engineer I ever met was my mom, right? She was a mechanical engineer. She worked for GE Power Systems and deployed natural gas turbines in the field, oversaw roughnecks putting natural gas turbines in place, inspecting natural gas turbines. And she, tinkered just as much as my dad did, also a mechanical engineer. They showed me what it looks like to fix things on a day-to-day basis, as if it was sort of a natural thing that people do all the time. And I was really lucky to have that example, because it didn't seem unusual at all for a woman to pursue engineering, and really unusual perhaps for someone to choose something else. So I'm really lucky that I had the mom that I did. I'm also really, go ahead.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
I've been inspired throughout my whole career by women like this. It doesn't take just one. At every stage, you need to see people who really inspire you. Here in this administration, I'm surrounded by them. There are a variety of women leaders across DOE. My direct boss is Under Secretary Geraldine Richmond, and of course, her boss is Jennifer Granholm. We engage directly all the time, and I have to say, these are women who, when they go home at night, they have a binder full of information they have to absorb about their meetings the next day, their work, the critical features of our work in the administration. And they do that homework. They read the memos, they understand the programs under them, and they have a real knack for inspiring people around them, especially Jennifer Granholm, the Secretary of Energy in the US, has been a real inspiration for me. She has a real dedication to the people around her in a way that's, I think, very inspiring.
And I will also say that Secretary Granholm visited Poland, I guess it was 2 years ago. And I know that you were there as well. And it's just such an inspiring image to see these two women being the forefront of leading and addressing the climate crisis and with energy security. I mean, it's really uplifting for young women here in Poland in particular, right? To see that anything is possible.
Yeah, we had the opportunity to visit Marie Skłodowska-Curie's house. The secretary really enjoyed that visit. We also visited the Polish Academy of Sciences and spoke to a very large group of women at your Academy of Sciences there in Warsaw. It was a really delightful visit, and I know the secretary really loves to be able to speak to women and future leaders in particular, but really appreciated that visit to Marie Curie's house.
Well, and I have to say that we have impeccable timing, because Marie Skłodowska-Curie, today, we are really giving her a bit of a birthday present. It's her birthday today. She would have been 160 plus years old. So we're really recognizing her in a way I'm sure that Marie would appreciate. And wow, how the world has changed. And she kind of set the tone for all of that, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's right.
A few other questions too regarding sort of some of your background that were submitted from some of the guests in advance. Some folks were curious about what your role in academia, in particular with nuclear energy, how we can make nuclear energy interesting for the next generation in college, in schools. It's an important role in what we need to do moving forward, right? But how do we get kids interested in pursuing careers in these fields?
Yeah, I think, it's such an important question, because not everyone's born with a mom who's an engineer, and other inspiration has to come. And frankly, it has to come early. We've really identified through a lot of research that interest in your chosen field really comes super fast in youth, and the development of the skills, especially numeracy and a comfort with numbers and a curiosity in science, can really be developed at a very young age. We do a lot of work in the Department of Energy to create resources for educators when they think about what it's like to teach those elementary school students the, basics of nuclear science and technology. There's a website that I'll ask our organizers to drop in the chat for you. It's called Navigating Nuclear, and it's designed to create a number of resources for different stages of learning, including resources for the classroom, where a teacher can just adopt some lesson plans that teach a particular aspect of nuclear science, whether it's, the different atoms and like neutrons and electrons and all the things that make up our universe, or something more complex in the high school stage that looks like, how does a reactor work? All of those things are covered in different lesson plans in this Navigating Nuclear set of resources. And I think it's things like this where we teach the teachers that can have the most scalable impact on the globe. If you focus all your attention on the inspiration of one child, you will probably succeed at inspiring that child, right? And that is worth doing. But, if we can get more attempts at the goal, then we're much more likely to succeed. And I think by scaling up through education and support of our teachers, especially in the US where they don't get as much support as they really should, we can really expand our impact and touch more youth and students. Something else that we try to do to make nuclear cool is our really excellent communications team inside the Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy. My office tries to put together really accessible fact sheets and information about, misconceptions around nuclear energy or new news in nuclear energy to kind of highlight the things that can be very cool. You can find a lot of that at just energy.gov or energy.gov/NE. But, you'll find it on our Twitter, on LinkedIn, and things of this nature, where we share on social media the kind of like quick snippets of, what an average American or an average citizen of the world needs to know about nuclear energy. And, some of our most visited blog posts in this series are the really fun ones, like 7 things the Simpsons got wrong about nuclear energy, right? Because spent nuclear fuel isn't a glowing green goo, and reactor operators usually aren't as doofusy as Homer Simpson. So anyone familiar with the Simpsons cartoon really thinks that's kind of fun, and it hits people in a sort of pop culture sense, and also has the feature of being educational.
And the more people you can teach, the more good, I suppose, we can do in the world, because nuclear energy is one of the solutions, right? I want you to perhaps just touch on that, because I know we talk about it all the time, how nuclear energy is the solution for the climate crisis, how nuclear energy is one of the solutions for energy security, and especially with what's going on right now here in Poland and next door and with Ukraine and everything, the priority that it goes to be, energy security is really at the forefront of what we're all discussing. So just from your own personal perspective, kind of what is that message to the general public about, why nuclear needs to be used, implemented, and why it's so important?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the question. I think, Poland's a real leader in this narrative right now. I think the recognition that the, US Polish government considers nuclear energy as a critical part of strategic energy security in the context of, our climate crisis, for example, and the need for cleaner energy as well. I really applaud Poland for recognizing that. The US sees this too. And in fact, the vast majority of multilateral studies on what it's going to take for our whole planet to get to net zero by 2050 all assess that we're going to need to really increase the amount of nuclear power in the world. Any deployment of renewable energy to replace the unabated fossils on this planet is going to need to be backed up by a source of firm, clean power. And whether it's the International Panel on Climate Change and their assessments on what it's going to take to stay under 1.5 degrees C, for example, or the International Energy Agency, the Nuclear Energy Agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, all of these agencies have conducted a variety of assessments on how much nuclear is going to be required. And many of them say we need to double or triple the amount of nuclear power on the planet. I think it does come back to the inspiration part that you were just talking about, Brittany, that, it is critical in a job. And I think anyone who has a job knows that it's much easier to go to that job every day if you think it's important. And I think the younger generation these days is really focused on a sort of values-driven career path, and ensuring that you're saving the world is a really critical part of any career decision for most of the educated young leaders I've ever seen. And while, in past generations, that was also important, I think we are in a really lucky phase of human civilization where, I forget who said this, but, our parents studied war and so that we can study economics, and, so that our children can study art, right? We're really in this phase now where, we really can we have the opportunity to incorporate our values into our career path. New nuclear is going to be essential as we sort of strive to meet these decarbonization goals, but energy security is at the heart of it too. As you mentioned, Brittany, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which again, Poland has been a key leader in allyship with Ukraine, and I would applaud you in that as well. The U.S. is with you in support for Ukraine. That invasion is a stark reminder that energy can be used as a weapon, and unscrupulous adversary can use it to really hurt innocent civilians and to damage the future of humanity. And nuclear energy, we had Minister Halushenko here yesterday visiting the Secretary. Our relationship is really strong with them and in our support of their continued energy activities. And I assure you that a huge part of our conversation was how nuclear will continue to be a part of their future energy grid, because it has served so well during this time of uncertainty, despite having one whole nuclear plant off. And the rest of the nuclear plants that have served Ukraine during this time have been a really reliable source of energy that doesn't need to be refueled every day. You don't have to bring fuel on site every day to make a reactor work, right? Every year and a half or 2 years, you need to refuel a part of the core. And that is real energy security in the context of, combat zones and challenges transporting fuel that we've seen in this context. So, and that's just one example, but, I think we're really looking to a future where this kind of energy security is critical to every nation's plans.
This is a message that Ambassador Brzezinski shares often. It's something I know because I often am part of crafting some of the dialogue, but energy security is national security. You can't have one without the other. It's all interconnected, and it's how democracies can thrive too. So I wanted to bring up actually a question that was dropped in here that I think is an important thing to address too, because now nuclear energy is kind of taken on kind of overlapping, right? There's a lot of different areas where it hits. And nowadays, there's this question of, as a sector, where do you see nuclear energy fitting more into, right? Is it the technology aspect? Is it the geopolitics aspect? Is it the innovation aspect? Or I guess, is it all of the above?
Yeah, I think when we look at careers, we're going to see, technologists, policy folks, we're going to see a lot of skilled construction trades. And in fact, the vast majority of the folks we'll need in the coming 10, 15 years will be, highly skilled electricians and welders and boilermakers. And that really creates kind of all of the above set of sectors that are critical to the industry. As Poland looks out toward your workforce and the development of the culture around nuclear energy, there'll be nuclear engineers, sure, folks like me, but you don't need as many of us as you need, communications folks and administrative staff and business leaders, folks who are really focused on, finance and insurance and project management, as well as the vast majority of them in the really early stages are going to be, construction trades and the skilled workers that can really build a highly technical facility to spec with certainty. And I think Poland has all of those things and, has always been a leader on the scientific and technical side. Poland has a rich history of scientific innovation and leadership, but also has this, industrial base that I think, is extremely valuable for your future. I don't know if that really answers the question, but it's what I think of when I think about this kind of intersectoral coverage that nuclear has.
Well, I can say that anytime we have an energy conversation, when we talk about the nuclear project here at the embassy, there is a number of different people represented. So we have folks from the economic section, we have folks from the political section, we have people from public affairs, we have the energy attaché. So I guess I answered my own question. I mean, that just proves it, right? It's kind of everybody's involved in some way, shape, or form. So. And I know you've brought this up already, Katie, but I think this is a very important conversation to have, especially with this audience, the nuclear deal, the nuclear project here in Poland. We have hit so many different milestones along the way as we get closer to the finish line. I know you've been involved, you've been here 3 times within the past 3 years. So where do things stand and what do we have to look forward to?
Yeah, so, you all have selected competitively Westinghouse to build 3 reactors, possibly more, to support the clean, firm energy on your grid. Westinghouse has actively moved forward to, finalizing that work. And, in addition to sort of establishing the, business paperwork and moving forward towards the initial investments that are really bringing this project to the beginning of reality, we have cooperation between the U.S. and Poland on nuclear regulation. Our Nuclear Regulatory Commission here in the U.S. has been so tightly engaged with your nuclear regulator in Poland. I think they've developed a really strong relationship that is critical to ensuring the safe and secure and, in fact, efficient operation of these plants. You've had regulators move from country to country sort of for months at a time to oversee each other's work. I think this is incredibly valuable. In my office, of course, we're really excited to be supporting this work, not only through the development of the contract and support, in the government-to-government engagement that occurred to get there alongside the ambassador and Assistant Secretary Light and others and your ministers who really shepherded this project into existence. We're also really excited to support it with some of the intangibles through this Clean Energy Training Center. We're really excited to be supporting a center that will support the vocational training and workforce capacity that I described earlier. We launched it in my last visit there with your ministers of energy and of climate, and we had a really exciting sort of discussion about what's possible. And the notion of this center is that we need to create a really fulsome, broad base of resources that, can not just educate it, but share lessons learned. The United States has the oldest and largest nuclear power fleet in the world. It's, some of our reactors are some of the first commercial reactors in the world, and we have 94 of them still operating. With hundreds of reactors and decades of operation, we have thousands and thousands of reactor years sort of experience of what can go right, how we can operate more efficiently, how we can improve processes and procedures and technology, how to construct reactors well and how to construct reactors not as well. And all of those lessons, I think, need to be shared if we're going to collaborate in the 100-year sense that we need to collaborate when we partner on a nuclear project. So the idea of the Clean Energy Training Center is to sort of provide a conduit between the U.S. government and our Department of Energy and your ministry and your public and our public and your nuclear industry that is developing and our, very large, significant nuclear industry that wants to help. And as you all deploy these reactors, I fully expect we will also learn in the opposite direction. As you, a nuclear newcomer nation with the capabilities that you have approach this project, you'll do it differently than we would do it today here in the US. And there are going to be ways that we can learn how to be better from the way you all approach these projects. We expect to see that through this Clean Energy Training Center, whether it's through workshops and seminars on lessons learned or the connections between technologists. We're really looking forward to seeing that support this kind of interaction.
Having this regional nuclear training center here in Poland, what does that say about Poland's role in the future of nuclear energy and the relationship with the United States? Because it's pretty huge, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the U.S.-Poland bilateral relationship is extremely strong. Of course, Poland's a key NATO ally of the United States. You know, like the United States, that relationship is critical to our, you know, continued feeling of safety and security. But we collaborate on so much more than all that. And the cooperation around this project takes on real urgency and relevance against the backdrop of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, establishing that, you know, in the face of a nation like Russia, you know, using energy as a weapon, that not only are the US and Poland partners in NATO, you know, which provides a weapons coverage, the US and Poland are partners in reducing the ability of countries to use energy as a weapon. By providing this energy security together, it's another leg on this stool of our shared energy security and our shared national security. And by ensuring that we're having this partnership set up in a way that is, you know, extremely respectful of everyone's sovereignty, but cooperative in the face of threats to that sovereignty, I think really doubles down on the kind of relationship that we've had bilaterally in the NATO space and in other spaces. You know, collaborations looking out into the future can include all kinds of things across the energy space with Poland and already do, you know, but I think as we think about this as an energy security component, this is like a you know, a magnification of our, you know, security related bilateral relationship that already exists and has been strong for some time.
And then Katie, you also talk about how the US can learn a lot from Poland, especially as this process gets underway. With the full intention, do you think that Poland will then share this expertise then throughout Europe? I mean, what role will Poland play in the region in kind of facilitating this energy transition?
Well, I really hope that that's the case. And I think that's certainly the intent and hope of much of your leadership there in Poland, which is truly visionary, frankly. And I think you should be very proud of your leaders in Poland that have enabled some of these, you know, engagements. I think we've had a real a glut, a large number of new nations interested in going from 0 to 100 on nuclear, you know, whether it's Ghana, right? Or, you know, nations like Poland. Those nations will look to Poland, whether it's, you know, in your direct region or even across the world in the global south, where clean energy and energy security transition is the most important thing for their survival. You know, we're in a place where we're really hoping that Poland will be able to guide those nuclear newcomer nations in what it's like to go from, you know, no civil nuclear power structure to really quickly moving through the regulatory and workforce and capacity building requirements to get to becoming a nuclear nation. But in addition to that, as you all build AP1000s, even old nuclear nations will be watching you to see how well it goes. Will you be able to do it efficiently? You know, how will your licensing arrangement interact with, you know, European agencies like Euratom? They're going to have a lot of templates to follow if they consider technologies like this and new nuclear, which a lot of your neighbors are already. And I think you guys are just you're in the lead. And so there's no question that the world will be watching, whether it's your, you know, regional neighbors in Central and Eastern Europe, especially, but also, you know, across the globe, and especially in places where we're, you know, really interested in seeing the growth of clean, firm nuclear technology, like, you know, in the global south, where there's been just this week, US-Africa Summit on nuclear energy to sort of capture all the great interests that we're seeing in Africa, for example, on new nuclear. They'll be looking to you too.
Regarding, because I think we often talk about the nuclear deal, but there's other layers to this, right? So small modular reactors, SMRs in short, acronyms, government, we love that stuff. So SMRs, how much will that be part of this puzzle for Poland in the future?
Yeah, you know, it remains to be seen, but I understand you have a number of commercial entities who have made deals establishing their commitment to deploy new nuclear there in Poland in the form of small modular reactors. One really good example is, I understand, Synthos Green Energy in collaboration with OPG, a utility in Canada, and TVA, a utility in the United States, have combined forces to support the finalization of the design of the GE Hitachi BWRX 300. This is a 300 megawatt boiling water reactor. It's a sort of shrunken version of a pretty standard plant design that we've seen across the world. But it has the benefit, one hopes, of being more modularly constructible, which should speed up construction timelines and reduce uncertainty and costs, and hopefully eliminate the risk of severe cost overruns in construction. It's also right-sized to replace a lot of unabated fossils like coal plants, which are often in the scale of a couple hundred megawatts. You all in Poland have very specific needs for that kind of size and scale of thermal energy, because you leverage district heating in a way that other countries don't leverage. I mean, you have a lot of district heating. The heat that's provided in your buildings, a lot of it comes directly from thermal sources that are currently unabated fossils in large part. And to replace that in a way that expressly leverages thermal energy as the primary energy source. Renewables, of course, most of them generate electric energy as its primary energy, so it would require a conversion from electricity to thermal, but nuclear energy, of course, is merely a very fancy way of boiling water. And this is, I think, an excellent one-for-one replacement for the kinds of unabated fossils that currently supply, for example, your district heating capabilities and other industrial heat that you need to decarbonize too, just as we do. And that's where we're looking to, is decarbonization of some of those unabated fossils that are retiring, or retired coal plants, especially here in the US. So it really matches what we're looking at too.
I wanted to also bring a question into the conversation that was dropped in by Aneta, which was inquiring about where things stand in the United States, because we have this target of 2050. President Biden released in 2021 this new agenda, gave us some targets, some things to think towards and to target, and we're getting there, but people are curious about what percentage of US energy stands right now on nuclear energy, and then what are the plans for the future, because some of these nuclear plants are going to have to be decommissioned, right, because they're older, so then new ones need to be brought back up. And I know this is what you're working on, so please do share.
Yeah, so today, nuclear power provides a little less than 20% of our electricity in the US. It's 93 nuclear power plants, very soon 94. When we turn on Unit 4 at Vogtle, which is an AP1000. We turned on Unit 3 and another AP1000 at the Vogtle nuclear power plant earlier this year. Those reactors are each about 1 gigawatt of clean, firm power. They run at a really high capacity factor. They're pretty much always available. And this is the backbone of our clean energy, because it produces about half of our carbon-free electricity. That 20% that's made by nuclear is about half of all the carbon-free electricity we make in the US. From a generation perspective, it's absolutely essential. We see through some of our federal government incentives to see the continuation of existing nuclear power plants, including tax incentives and others that we've just released under this administration. We're enabling a lot of these reactors to consider lifetime extensions, and we've seen a number apply for subsequent license renewals. So an initial nuclear power plant, when we first sort of set up the industry, the assumption was that they would last probably at least 40 years, but let's find out, if we need to run them longer, we'll deal with that later, right? And a number of nuclear power plants have long since applied for and gotten subsequent license renewals to get to 60 years. And most recently, we're seeing them go to 80 years. And I'd like to see the whole fleet of nuclear power plants really contemplate whether that's possible for each of those reactors. It won't be possible for every single reactor, but most nuclear technologies really can continue to operate in that kind of 80-year period with sufficient regulatory oversight. So we're seeing those subsequent license renewals kind of keep those existing plants online, but it's not going to be enough. We assess that in order to hit our 2050 net zero goals, we have to build nuclear power at an incredible rate. if you back calculate from that major goal where we decarbonize all of our currently carbon emitting industrial needs and our transportation and our electric grid, we're going to need 550 to 770 new clean gigawatts of firm power, of which 1 to 200 new gigawatts will have to be nuclear. So that doubles or possibly triples the amount of nuclear power capacity we will have to, have by 2050. So we need to not just double our nuclear fleet, but probably triple it. And it's a really big task. This isn't a statement of what we think is likely. It's not even a statement of what we're sure is possible. It is a statement of what is necessary. And that 1 to 200 gigawatts, we've built nuclear power really quickly in the past in the United States, typically through the production of these large gigawatt scale plants. Between 1970 and 1990, we basically built over those 20 years, 100 gigawatts, which is about what we have today. And we're going to have to do that again, but slightly faster. I don't know if you're counting, but it's less, it's less than 30 years between now and 2050. And so we are going to have to build out these gigawatts at least as fast as we did in the fastest years of our build out of nuclear power in the US in the 70s and 80s. So it's going to take a lot. And what's required in the very near term is to see a bunch of nuclear reactor contracts from the customers lining up in real time very soon so that those supply chains can be built out efficiently. We can't build them all at once in 2049. That's going to be a really tough supply chain to support. So we have to start now so that that supply chain can be built up gradually and efficiently.
And Katie, we talk about doing this fast, but nuclear power plants, building them, that's kind of an oxymoron, right? I mean, I often hear, like, why is this taking so long? Why is it not done yet? Why is it not constructed yet? But that's really common, right? Like a nuclear power plant from start to finish, from when the conversation begins to the contracts are signed, I add the S, and then building and actually being finalized. I mean, it's fairly common that this takes years.
A decade, 15 years, sometimes longer. Sometimes shorter, in the past, the business part of it wasn't always so complicated. The licensing part of it has gotten longer in the US, and we're making strides, across the US government to reduce the speed or reduce the time it takes to provide permits for, EPA requirements and whatnot, lowering the barrier, but not the standards, right? And I think we'll see in the NRC some efficiencies improving as we see more license applications should speed that up a little. But the thing that I think will speed it up the most is a little bit of practice, real practice and efficiency in building these plants is going to be important. In addition, of course, to the more modular construction that I mentioned earlier for some technologies where we hope to see them being built a little bit more like airplanes than airports. We see any kind of $1 billion or above mega project can be just really hard to handle on a timeline and cost schedule, whether it's a new train line or an airport. In the US, we have a big highway project called the Boston Big Dig that lasted like a decade. And it was just a road, basically. Any kind of mega project has real challenges because of the complexity and the size of them. And by reducing the size of these reactors, we reduce the complexity. And ideally, we also reduce the dangers with cost overruns and risks to, financial project management issues that are sort of just inherent in mega projects.
So I wanted to move on, Katie, to some of the cool things that the DOE is working on and perhaps some things that you are working on. So we'll start there first. Is there anything that you want to talk about with some big projects or just some things that you're really proud of in your work here at DOE?
Yeah, absolutely. This office really focuses on keeping existing reactors running, building, supporting the build out of new advanced reactors, securing and sustaining our fuel cycle, and expanding our international cooperation. So, as we think about some of those technical components, I'm really excited to see some of the advancements in our existing fleet to explore how our existing fleet can be used to power hydrogen production. For example, nuclear power is excellent for hydrogen production, in part because it inherently produces heat. And some of the most efficient processes for hydrogen production are processes that combine not just electricity, but also direct heat. For example, high temperature electrolysis is somewhat more efficient on an energy return on investment basis than others. And so we'd love to see some of that really efficient hydrogen being produced. We've executed some really big domestic hydrogen hubs that are targeting, really building out that hydrogen market. And 3 of them involve nuclear. In addition, we're really interested in seeing, in the second priority space, we're really interested in seeing new nuclear reactors built. And so we're supporting through public-private partnerships, a variety of reactors at different stages of development. Some of them won't be ready technologically for commercialization for 15 years, but some of them, we are public-private partnership. We've created these public-private partnerships to build them today. That includes the Natrium TerraPower sodium-cooled fast reactor that's being built in Wyoming, the X-Energy XE100 high-temperature gas reactor that's being built in Texas, the NuScale carbon-free power project. But we have risk reduction awardees like the Holtec SMR 160 that are right on their tails that, we and DOE are providing them some funding to reduce the risk of their technology development. The same is true, with some awards to the GEBWRX 300 design on their construction approach. There's a whole variety of reactors, micro reactors of very small sizes in the sort of 5 megawatt scale. We're supporting Westinghouse and its, heat pipe based eVinci reactor. I just celebrated the opening of their basically reactor fabrication facility in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I mean, we're really excited. And there are dozens of reactor companies that we're supporting in this way, some of them in the really big demonstration scale, but many of the really exciting projects in the licensing and technology development space where they might not commercialize for another 5 or 10 years, but that's still in time to help with that 2050 goal. And in particular, some of those technologies are going to target very specific applications with regard to, decarbonization of industrial, applications. Especially very high temperature reactors can be extremely valuable in the, chemical production and industrial combined heat and power applications that we have in the U.S.
Maybe one of the biggest stories to come as of late from nuclear, at least 2 from an innovation standpoint, and what's to come for nuclear energy in the future, was the nuclear fusion ignition, that breakthrough. I know that was a couple of months ago, but I mean, that was big news around the world. Katie, explain why that's so huge, what that means for the future of nuclear technology.
Yeah, in December of last year, so almost a year ago, we did see, an achievement of fusion ignition. And since then, that experiment's been replicated. There's been a lot of attention on fusion startups that might commercialize fusion. But this experiment has been a federal government supported scientific capability to really demonstrate that you can ignite a fusion plasma. This is the first step in really, capturing the energy from fusion. There are a number of steps once you discover reaction is possible, right? I think the fusion reaction was discovered in maybe the 20s. The fission reaction discovered in 1932 by Lisa Meitner, whose birthday it also is today. And 10 years later, through the Manhattan Project, that fission reaction, we had figured out how to make it happen, how to sustain it in a controllable way, and how to make real technologies, engineer real technologies out of it using kind of clever materials. With fusion, it's a little harder. With fusion, you're trying to hold together, I would say, it's sort of like, the one good analogy is that it's like magnetic confinement fusion, which uses magnetic fields, is like holding Jell-O together with a rubber band or many rubber bands, right? You have some amorphous blob that doesn't want to hang together and you're trying to contain it with smooth strips of magnetization and magnetic fields, and then compress it until it's at a high enough compression and temperature that this hot charged dense gas ignites. Now, this ignition that DOE achieved was through inertial confinement fusion, which instead of confining and constraining with magnetic fields, tries to force the fusion to occur through inertial confinement with lasers. So dozens and dozens of lasers all pointed at a single tiny place, all, lasing at once, push the atoms, actually push, using the photons and the momentum of those photons, push the atoms together all at once in hopefully a symmetric way. And then those atoms fuse together with the, energy buildup. The National Ignition Facility uses this laser technology. A lot of commercial fusion startups are looking at the magnetic fusion type primarily. Some are interested in combining the two. But the achievement of ignition at this inertial confinement fusion facility brings us sort of with fusion to a place where not only is it a reaction that we understand, but now it's a reaction that we can control and get extra energy out of. We've demonstrated that we can execute the fusion reaction through, for example, the hydrogen bomb, but controlling it and getting energy out of it are a much bigger, more complicated problem. We still are going to face materials challenges, heat exchanger challenges. It's not an easy problem. If it were easy, in 1942, we would have had a fusion reactor too, but fusion is an inherently harder reaction and it's taken time. But I think we're approaching a space where we know a lot more than we did. And this ignition really is a milestone, a checkbox along the pathway, the raceway towards, achievement in fusion. So we're excited about it.
Can I also say too, that you can never question your love for nuclear energy and just talking about this, because you are just really into it and you can tell. So
that's right. The enthusiasm comes for free.
Yeah. So you picked the right career path, I suppose. I would be remiss to not also bring up something that you've mentioned, because we talked about pop culture and kind of increasing interest for nuclear energy. You talk about the Manhattan Project. We had a big blockbuster Hollywood movie in Oppenheimer. I know this wasn't a question submitted by other people, but I do think it did increase interest in nuclear energy and sort of, because it really how Department of Energy began, right? I mean, absolutely. The Manhattan Project is sort of the birth of the Department of Energy and where you're at right now. So do you think it successfully helped people become more interested in what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen a lot more sort of, curious conversation in the public sphere coming out of that movie, a little more awareness of the, complex history that eventually resulted in what is in the United States, a massive national laboratory complex dedicated to a variety of peaceful sciences. And having, such an interesting character and such an interesting time in our history, being, on the big screen in this incredibly well-produced movie, it's always good to be having a conversation about a topic as important as this. And I think it's also really important that, the nuclear weapons history that spurred a lot of our understanding of nuclear science and technology and enabled us to, enact peaceful uses of that technology, it's an important part of that, our history, to know about and to acknowledge when we think about, how to advocate for the more, peaceful uses of this technology. This is actually also this year, the 70th anniversary of a very important speech by former U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower. It was called the Atoms for Peace speech. And in it, he sort of invokes the looming threat of potential war and nuclear proliferation across the globe, in particular with the H-bomb that was coming, and says that basically we must strip the weapons component off of this technology and provide it to scientists so that they can use it for peaceful uses, whether it's agriculture or energy or medicine. And in a very prescient sense, he listed all of those things in his suggestion that the International Atomic Energy Agency be established. He provided this speech to the United Nations General Conference, the UN Assembly, and as a result of it, established the International Atomic Energy Agency, as well as a lot of cooperation around the globe in peaceful use of nuclear energy. And I think the more people know about the weapons history of nuclear energy, the more I think they'll find this peaceful future tied to it.
And for everyone in the audience, that Atoms for Peace speech is actually easy to find. It's one of my favorites as well. I'm also a bit partial since I write speeches, so very, very powerful words that persuaded some folks and needed to be said at that point in time. You talk about peaceful use of nuclear energy. I know we're running out of time, but I do want to bring up one really interesting part of nuclear energy that I think a lot of people don't know is that nuclear energy is also powering us to go into outer space, to go to Mars. Like, I don't think that's a conversation that's often shared, but can you give us a little insight on how astronauts might one day travel to Mars with rocket fueled by nuclear power? That's incredible.
Yeah, it could be, nuclear powered hypersonics, or in the very real, kind of boring sense, actually, I have an example. Not very professional to be running around my office, but this is actually a little Hot Wheels car of the Mars rover, the Mars Perseverance rover, that my office helped to provide a radioisotope thermal generator that powers this Mars rover. It's a car-sized robot. It's got 6 wheels, and it has a little nuclear battery attached to it that my office got to build out in Idaho. It's one of the coolest things that we do as part of our work. And, it's pretty straightforward technology. It doesn't even go critical. It just uses the decay of radioactive isotopes to provide heat that can then be converted to electricity. But as we move beyond that sort of radioisotope generated power, we can think about things like reactors that would be suitable to power a moon base. And NASA's already thinking really hard about that fission surface power idea and working with my office on it. And of course, as you noted, rocket type designs that would leverage nuclear power to sort of boost the distance and capability are all within real reach. We've had actually reactors in space for some time powering satellites. A lot of them are Russian, actually, but some of them are American and of other technologies. But the notion of reactors in space is actually quite old, and everything old is new again.
You said moon base, so you mean nuclear energy could be powering people living on the moon? I had to just backpedal there a little. Yeah.
That's right. And as we think about what it looks like to have a sort of station on the moon, NASA has certainly a mission to enable sort of longer term, stationary capability on the moon someday. And there are a few requirements. The reactor should be always on and shouldn't require a great deal of control. It should be as small as humanly possible, because the cost of any space mission is directly correlated to the mass of that space mission. And so as light as possible, but as reliable as possible as well, without, a lot of extra shielding and whatnot, because of course you're volume limited in space missions too. But it should be easy to operate, and you should be able to operate it from like less than a kilometer away and just have one, power cord from that fission surface power module powering your, moon base. And NASA is actively working on this. Other space agencies are working on this. And it's been really interesting to see what microreactor companies have come up with for terrestrial applications and how they can be adapted to consider moon operations, lunar, if you will.
Coming soon. That is incredible. We have come a very long way, a very far way in nuclear energy, that's for sure. I want to close, Katie, with going back to the title of this actual whole series and this conversation in general, Inspire, Empower, Lead. So we talked about inspiring, we talked about empowering, but leading. What is your advice for Polish women and men, right? Because we need their support as well, to be a leader, to inspire, to be to that stage where they're uplifting other folks, to be a mentor, etc. What is your words of encouragement for the people here in Poland?
The secretary was asked this when she was speaking to the Polish Academy of Sciences, and she gave the advice she often gives, and I'll give it to you all as well, because I've taken it, and I have to agree with it. She has a favorite book on leadership and management and called The Leadership Challenge. I encourage you to read it. It's sort of targeted at folks looking for sort of a framework and a philosophy for how to lead. I think it's very clever. And, while I'm not the sort of general audience for this sort of thing, I think one of the most important parts of this book is a real focus on how to inspire the heart of the people that work with you, to really bring to them a feeling that they are doing something of great importance. And I think we have that here in this mission in nuclear energy by default. we don't even have to work for it. We just have to remind each other of the importance of that mission and the importance of each person in achieving that mission. So I would just reiterate Secretary Granholm's book recommendation with this sort of particular focus that, you know, there's this component of it that's, you know, leading the heart of the people around you. And I think that comes down to purpose.
And loving what you do, because I think that's part of it too. You need to pick wisely your career path and do something that you truly passionately care about, because it just exudes. I know you're not here in the room physically with me, but like we can all feel it. And that makes a difference for everyone, because people then will want to learn more about how they can help or, you know, contribute to making nuclear energy one of the solutions for all the challenges our world faces. So that should about cover it for our time. Unfortunately, that has been an hour. It flew by.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And, you know, just good luck. I hope to be back in Poland anytime soon. You know, you all are just the best. And I'm really inspired by everything your country's doing. So thank you for having me.
Katie, thank you so much for being here. All of our guests, thank you for logging on. Thank you for supplying content and writing here in the chat box. We really appreciate it. There'll be many more of these Inspire, Empower, Lead discussions in the near future. We hope to see you there. Thank you again so much.